to the Psychotic Break. I'm Maddie,
And I am Kimmy.
and this episode is all about associations. Briefly, before we get started, I want to apologize for my voice. I am feeling a little under the weather, but that won't stop me from having a good time because I am amped for this episode.
As am I, but I'm very scared of where this will delve into with a lot of digressions.
Mm hmm. Yeah, associations, for anyone who doesn't know, is anytime we have an idea and we connect it with a completely separate idea. The association of words with another word or a behavior with a stimulus. The list is endless, and I thought it would be fun to give you guys examples from our own lives. For me, I have a lot of weird associations, especially with food. I have this one association that no one understands, and that is I associate mangoes with gasoline.
How?
I'm pretty sure that when I was little, my mom took me to a gas station, and we're Filipino, so she gave me a mango, as one does at the gas station, and I ate it. And maybe it was just a really bad mango, but as I was smelling the gasoline and eating the mango and just not having a good time, now every single time I smell or even see a mango, I feel like I'm smelling gasoline somewhere. And I haven't even eaten a mango since then because I'm afraid that when I taste it, I'm just gonna think gasoline.
Okay, well, what makes this interesting is two thoughts. First of all, I just had an association with my own issues with food. Secondly, that makes me realize why you always screamed if there was a mango in your drinks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
just scarred. I can't deal with it.
So even if you saw like a chopped up mango, you would be gasoline. Even if it's blended up in a smoothie, which you are very used to smoothies, you'd be like, no.
In my mind, I am picturing a gas station.
Not the smell, a gas station?
Well, the smell comes along with it.
Okay.
Can't
How
explain it. It's just a hard association I have. What's your food association?
um so my friend has a dog, one of those big furry dogs. And so the smell of dog really gets on the body, especially if you stay
Mhm.
overnight. If you've ever been near a wet dog, it's not great.
Mhm.
And I had that scent all over me, and when I finally got home, my mom had cooked me steak. This was
Oh
one of
no.
the last and the few times I will eat steak because, first of all, I have like a weird issue with steak to begin with because it's bloody and I think that's kind of gross.
Mhm.
But when eating it, all I smelled was dog, so I pictured eating my friend's dog, who I love very dearly.
Oh no.
And yeah, exactly. So from now on, I don't tend to eat steak, and if I do, it has to be masked in the smell of garlic.
Mm.
So that is the only thing. However, the first time I ate steak in 5 years, I was next to a dog, and I was forcing it down because I didn't have a heart to tell the family that I don't eat steak because it was a birthday dinner for someone.
Mhm. Well, I have another food association, and this one's a little bit weird.
But
So,
not the other one.
this one's weirder than the other one.
No.
So, I associate beans with just a bad thing, something that I cannot have, like illness almost.
Okay.
And whenever I think of beans, whenever I see beans, I feel like I have to gag. And my dad tells me that when I was little, there was some sort of conundrum with me and my beans, and I either didn't eat my beans or maybe I spilled my beans, and he reprimanded me for that. He yelled. He was very mad at me, and he thinks that the reason I don't eat beans now, I wouldn't say I'm afraid of beans, but I just like I will not deal with beans. Like, and I'm talking about like brown, black, refried. Green beans is fine, but like all of the other beans, just no way. And he keeps telling me this story, but here's the thing, I don't remember that. I have
Oh,
no recollection of that happening, yet I still feel extremely aversive towards beans.
this whole time I thought you just didn't like the coyote beans because it's not authentic Mexican food.
I actually love coyotes, but you're right, I always take the beans out. Yeah, I'm like the worst consumer of Mexican food because I never have beans. I dated a guy who was Mexican. Maybe that's why it didn't work out.
Okay, but refried beans sometimes are in a paste. You can't even have a paste, or is it the actual shape of bean?
Somehow refried beans? Okay, you know what? I think I'm afraid of refried beans. Like that's just like too far. The I imagine the texture and I just want to scream.
But it's the same texture as tomato paste.
Tomato paste.
You don't know
I don't
tomato
think I've ever
paste?
had tomato paste. Maybe I'll
Well,
stay away from tomato paste.
that is so weird. So you have an indirect trauma that you repression. It must have really scarred you as a child.
I guess so, but I think that's a nice segue into the idea that association. I knew I'd mess it up.
Number one.
Associations are, for the most part, unconscious. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, they must be. Okay, I could argue that a nickname is almost an association. When I was younger, I was always
Mm.
called Monkey because I climbed on things,
Mhm.
and that was something I caused because I like to climb and I wasn't really reprimanded, so I just kept climbing. And then in
Mhm.
response, my name was Monkey, and so I would respond to Monkey. But that one was almost kind of forced because you're being constantly called that because of something you do. And it's almost like the reinforcement and punishments, but this one is there's nothing, this is being added, nothing's really taken away, and I'm keeping it going. But even with my whole nickname Kimmy, it was something I was given. I never really even said, "Hey, do I even like Kimmy?" It was handed
Hmm.
off, and I kind of went with it. As compared to something that happened subconsciously, almost. This one was consciously occurring, and at any point I could have said, "Oh, I don't really like Kimmy anymore," but I still roll with it because it's been put there.
That's interesting. I never even thought about nicknames. Hmm. And just the idea that we associate the sounds of our names with who we are.
Yeah.
And that's how nicknames come about. Maddie is short for Madeline, and you just make that connection. Maddie, of course, that's Madeline. And everyone has different associations. Now I'm just thinking about my name too, Madeline. I think of the cookie, Madeline
Oh,
cookies. You know, those little like seashell kind of things.
yeah.
And gosh, it's just so interesting how we make those connections. One of the notes that I put in our outline was, are associations just mental heuristics, like mental shortcuts that we make to make the thought process a little quicker, a little more smooth?
I'm going to agree, and then I'm going to bring up a point in that, whereas a big thing of if you literally look up why do we have associations, the answer is to maintain knowledge, to maintain memories, keep the recall happening because one thing leads into another and they're all shortcuts if you want to think about it like that to get to another idea, another memory because if we're doing, you brought up Madeline's, and now I'm thinking about also the book, what other kind of things are associated with the name. And when I pictured that, I have a memory of reading all of those books, and then you have that really kind of bad movie. But then if we think about the cookie, it's always that stereotype of your dad knows you like one thing and he'll buy a shitload of it.
Mm.
And my dad thought I liked them, and so he bought a crap load, and I kept eating them even though I didn't want to. And then I think about those gummy candies, like the gummy snacks, like the Weshels or something. And
Oh,
I ate those once, and he bought 3 Costco boxes. And then I keep making these associations of things that my father has ran with because I ate
mhm.
them once in front of him.
Oh my gosh. Guys, this is a sneak peek into one of our episodes called Free Association.
In the making.
To kind of connect that idea with Freud, and sorry guys, I know I wouldn't say anti-Freud. I've been studying him all week this week for class, so I don't know, I'm becoming a Freudian. Anyways,
Same.
he has this thing called free association where it's the typical you sit back in a couch and you're looking at the ceiling and the therapist is sitting by your head out of sight and you're just asked to say whatever's on your mind. And
Mhm.
it's called a free association because you are making associations like crazy. That's all you're doing, really. You can't just come up with random words. No,
Yeah.
all of them have a line or a string connecting them in that process of thought, which is so fascinating. Why do we do that? To think that you can connect like Welch's gummies with Madeline's is amazing. It's weird, don't get me wrong, but it's amazing.
Okay, I'm making more associations because of this. When I picture free association, I'm picturing a different form of therapy, which is the
Mm.
Worcestershire blocks. I'm
I think
so
it's called
sorry, but
Rorschach.
it which one?
I think it's called Rorschach.
That sounds way more accurate, and it actually looks like the spelling too. But I've never been able to pronounce it. I usually start describing it, and people are like,
Mm.
"I understand that,"
It's
but
also
it's
called the ink blot test.
that is more simple. If you couldn't guess by now, it's ink on blocks and you put it on a paper and you make people kind of guess it because it's very ominous pictures. Some of them do have underlying meanings underneath them that they're hoping you grab from that. But the ink block test is basically a free association. And I'm picturing it almost where therapy for free association, they're kind of giving you leads to think of things that they want to transition into, where if they give you the ink block test and it's a certain image, they're like, do you see a couple fighting? And you're like, yeah, or the image already has a similar outline of a couple fighting because they want to bring you into this so they can find the trauma. Because when we think of Freud or we think of the very early kind of psychoanalysis type of therapy, it's all underlying therapists leading you into something because they want the unconscious.
Exactly. And the whole thing with Freud was he was all about the unconscious. So was Jung, which we can talk about in a second. But specifically with Freud, he was all about sex and unconscious drives that just need to be fulfilled. And free association was a window into someone's unconscious because you're not just creating these associations, they are ingrained in you. And I believe that it is a way that you can express your unconscious motives. We don't even have to start with dream analysis because I think that's all unconscious. But the whole idea with free association is the therapist is listening in, honing on, and he might drop a few things here and there to prompt you in the right direction. But really, they just want to know what is the raw material in your brain.
Yeah. And t- t- I, I've never really thought too much about free association and the unconscious with therapy because I never truly believed in it. I do like the whole prompting, having a conversation dialogue, but I'm just now thinking I'm gonna have like a little moment with myself.
Well, let me add on to that because the whole Rorschach inkblot test and Let's be honest, I'm just flexing that I know how to say that word. Rorschach. Let me say it wrong. Let me look it up, and it's just wrong. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Um, okay, so with Jung, you have the association test, and the ink blot test is an example of that, but you also have the thematic apperception test, the TAT,
Mhm.
which I don't believe was from Jung or Yoon. I don't remember who that was from, but what it is you have a series of images, just snapshots in time of people. I did this in my personality psych class last week. First image was of a captain talking to what seemed like a news reporter, and you were asked to write for 10 minutes. Doesn't matter what you write, but you see a picture, make a story about it. And then there
Mhm.
was another picture of a couple sitting on a bench. In my mind, the girl seemed like she was not paying much attention to the guy, and the guy seemed so invested in her. So I was like, oh, this is definitely a breakup scene. Uh, I saw this one picture of a female chemist and another female chemist who looked like she was evaluating her. And I wrote this long story about this girl who was female in science, and she had defeated the odds, and she had shown proven to herself and her male colleagues that she
Oh
can
my
do this. And
gosh.
then I ended the story at then she went to this school and was she found another woman in science, and this woman in science was just so cruel. There couldn't be two women in science, and I don't know why my mind went there, but who knows, maybe that is my unconscious being tapped into through this associative nature. I'm seeing these images and I'm being asked to draw upon my associations. And that's one of the best ways you can learn about someone. And what really kind of shocked me was I was like, how are people going to be able to evaluate this in some sort of valid, reliable way? And it turns out that they had a measuring system. There was a measuring system on power, which makes sense because there's a picture of a captain. Are we showing that he is dominant? He has like exerted his power. He's a great hero. There was this one was like felt like a personal attack, but if you said that the couple was breaking up, they were like, "Oh, you probably have attachment issues." I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, what? You're not wrong, but hey."
I'm kind of surprised with the analysis of having attachment issues. I was picturing, because we're on association, that you're speaking from experience. You're thinking of your own memory, and you know what a breakup looks like because you've already seen one. And I can see where they would get attachment from that. They do need an underlying issue for all of these in order to make a whole test out of it. But you could argue that when you see the picture of the captain, you've seen maybe Captain Hook, and he's the controller of the pirates. You know that he has the power. That's an association. That's from media. That is like the powerhouse of everything. You don't have to think it's from this other possible underlying mental thing that's coming out of there. It could just be daily life.
And that's the thing. The reason people are so willing to attack Freud, the reason I've been so willing to attack him, is because he's just trying to make something out of what might just be nothing. Our free association might just be that weird associations that we have, like streams of conscious or unconscious thought that can't really be evaluated by anyone else. But the fact is, he tried to make some sort of sense of why we do this. And whether we agree with him or not, we're getting closer to the truth just by talking about him.
We are, and he we have to give him credit for tackling something that is the very unknown, and it still is the very unknown, and sometimes the unknown should be left behind. But I understand your slight respect for him.
We'll have an episode all about Freud.
Well, now I'm picturing about the whole like Oedipus complex where
Oh my
he
gosh.
must have made we mentioned it briefly where it's he must have made some type of association with his own life to create this kind of topic because you can't come up with something so radical without having your own experience, assuming we follow the breakup thing and not this over elaborate analysis of someone's life.
Yeah. I will add that Freud apparently did a lot of drugs. So maybe he got these visions and he's just like, I have tapped into the unconscious. This is what this means, and this is why a free association works.
Now, I'm going to agree with that. And this is a slight digression, but there's an artist out there. If you really look up artists, he does a portrait of himself on all different types of drugs, and they completely stream out the craziest things because certain drugs, he was finding drugs you've never even heard of. He was huffing crap never known. Would look it up because it's actually very interesting. Like there are some certain drugs where he was inhaling bleach or something, or like some like black market stuff, and he would paint himself completely normally. But then he took one drug and he was painting himself as a snake, and it's very interesting. But back to the point of, yeah, if Freud is on drugs, he must have probably made up some memory or intrigue, or the whole maybe you're sexually attracted to like a person that looks like your mom and then you didn't even think about it and now he's like, oh, that comes back to this. But
Mhm.
under a lot of drugs I could definitely see just a spew of associations and random fake correlations coming back to this one point.
Yeah. I mean, when I don't condone drugs, people, but for the sake of science and understanding this, I would imagine that being on drugs, you're obviously not as inhibited as you are in your normal, uh, not stable, sober self.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining, and I have no interest in trying this, but I'm imagining what it's like to be on drugs, to not be restricted in any way, to just follow one association after the other. We've talked about where associations can lead us. Like, they're pretty weird. So, no wonder being on drugs is so trippy, as they say. That seems kind of scary to me. Like, how far can you really go into associations before you touch on topics of death and darkness and all things bad?
Mm, so, not my own personal experience. However, I do have my own experience in that kind of realm, but not to this extent of like hallucinogenic, trippy, existential stuff. But just like knowing my own friends and stuff, and knowing this one experience of this guy who had not done, I believe it was acid, and he started seeing the devil, and he absolutely lost his shit. And if anyone knows acid, it's like a 12-hour plus trip. You're stuck in that hellhole for like
Oh
a
my
fat
gosh.
loop. And it's weird that his mind went to that because they do emphasize that you should be in a good mental state before doing hallucinogenics because it is such a long trip.
Mhm.
But I now I'm thinking about how mood can affect your associations because I don't know that guy's mental state, but I'm not saying I want to test it, but I'd love to talk with all of my friends to figure out, were they in a better place
Hmm.
to kind of start doing like a long trip, because I have a friend who had a very large trauma, and she was able to do acid multiple times within that period, and she was fine throughout that first year of trauma. But then at the once that year had passed, she did acid one more time, and she finally had a bad trip about the trauma and about herself. And it's weird to enter that state where is the association coming from that enters you into that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I would say that mood definitely has an effect on your associations. How you feel is going to impact how you think. And I mean, it's kind of the chicken and the egg sort of deal. Are we really a product of how we feel, or is it the other way around?
Oh,
It's kind of a mess there. And that's why I never want to do drugs, because it's so unpredictable. It doesn't really matter how you're feeling. Ideally, you'd be feeling good if you choose to do that for avoiding the risk of having
Yeah.
a bad trip or anything like that, but you can't really control that. Things happen. We have so many thoughts in our brain. Not all of them are good. I don't think it's possible to go your entire life without having a bad trip or being emotional when you drink alcohol, because in free association, it's pretty much just fair. Everything's fair game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We connect the dots in crazy ways. So I guess I'm saying don't do drugs, people.
I I really feel like this episode has become the free association episode because it's almost loose rambles, but I'm emphasizing that to preface my now new idea, which is a therapy based on music, because I don't have this very often, but people relate like a certain song that they hear or that genre to a memory that could be like good or
Ooh,
bad. And that would be a new version of free association where you could play jazz and maybe you have no reaction, but all of a sudden you play some like weird Post Malone crap and all of a sudden you're bawling on the floor to stay
yeah.
because for some reason you remember listening to this while in like the darkest part of your life and you've repressed some memories associated with that.
Oh my gosh. Just touching on music, that's fascinating. I have a funny story. I was dating this one guy and he would never want to make out while we were listening to music. And I thought that
Huh.
was a little weird. I like listening to music. I have the ability to not associate myself or not associate music with the person that I'm with. If it's a
Mhm.
nice song, then okay, great. If it's not a nice song, oh, who cares? I'm making out with this guy. It's good. It's gonna be good anyway. But we would just be kissing, and he would stop all of a sudden and change the song, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is such a drag. Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
And he even asked me, "Oh, do you like kissing while playing music?" And I'm just like, "Oh yeah, it's cool. I don't really care." And then he's just like, "Really? I put so much thought into it." And I'm just like,
Oh.
"Huh, that's really interesting." So I'm imagining this guy while he's with this girl, just thinking about all of these things instead of me, which is so fascinating. And that begs the question, who is more prone to associations than others? And do we have different triggers for association? What's funny is I actually do associate a type of music with this guy now. I've never done that in my entire life.
Ooh.
But since he brought it up, every time Vampire Weekend plays, can't stop thinking about it. And then I don't even like Vampire Weekend anymore.
Oh my. Oh, ha, ha. That is so
Associations
weird.
are powerful.
They really are, and I'm don't want to run over the time or anything, but it's I once went back and looked at all of our friends from high school and I went through their Spotify's because out of pure boredom, because like why not?
Uh-huh.
And you would find simp playlists or sex playlists of our old classmates dedicated to that person they're dating, and we kind of know some of them, which ugh.
Mm.
But and I remember I once made a joking like sex playlist because I was like, let me find like those like stereotypical songs like Pony from Genuine, where that's like the
Mm.
stereotypical like jump on it, let's do it. It's the first song that anyone would think of, but I
Mm.
would never actually play that during sex. First of all, I don't want music during sex, but then you see in TV shows people like pull out their iPod Nano because back in the day, and they'd have to find that perfect song to listen to, and that's what I'm picturing with this person.
Mm.
That they already had almost this plan in their head of what the most ideal song is for a certain part of the script of like intimacy.
That's so interesting to think about.
Oh, but on that, for people that are, I don't want to say players because that's a very old term, but someone that might be defined as a player, do they have a common social script for their active intimacy where they know they already have that planned out playlist for the songs timed out accordingly to move on to each step that they only know for themselves, that like this is the one specifically for this, you know?
I guess we'll leave that question to the listeners. Alright, I don't know if I have a coin anywhere. I have a penny. Pennies flip. Oh wait, what's this? Ah, I do have a quarter. Alright, time for our 1 minute wrap up. Heads or tails, Kimmy?
I'll go with heads this time.
Alright, feeling confident. Heads.
Ah, okay. Let me pull. Oh, that's just set off a recording thing. Okay. And let us begin. Today we talked about associations, and associations are just these correlations, connections, whatever comes to mind when you think of something, and they come to us because of possibly the unconscious, maybe because they want to help us retain a memory, to correlate to another memory, to retain knowledge, all part of that cycle of memory. And then we went into a lot of digressions, and then kind of almost the history of associations and associations within therapy from Carl Jung and Freud, with free association or the other tests of like the TAT, the ink block, whatever may get someone kind of flowing juices in the mind to uncover possible repression, whatever weird memory that comes to mind to explain the randomness of our heads.
Nice! Great job, Kimmy!
Thank you.
Alright, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little association episode. Let us know if you had any associations while listening to us. On that note, get excited for the next episodes to come. We've got so many great ideas for you. Free association is just one of them, so make sure you subscribe and interact with us. Where can they find us, Kimmy?
You can find us on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please like. Please comment. I finally subscribed as an
Yeah,
update from the last episode. You should follow us on Instagram at,
the Psychotic Break .pod.
and we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So leave us a follow, at least for Spotify, or leave us a like and a comment on Apple.
Sounds great. All right, you want to do our outro?
Okay, well, thank you guys for listening. I'm Kimmy.
And I'm Maddie. This has been the Psychotic Break. Bye.
Bye.